playing a fool's game, hoping to win, and telling those sweet lies and losing again.
Alright, me darlings. So today we're taking a look at the third and final subplot of Series 3, Owl's journey to find a mate. Now for those who watched the first episode will know that Owl left White Deer Park to go off and find a mate after the humiliating taunts of Weasel, and in her journey, a lot of the areas she'll visit will seem very familiar to her and us as well. This is where a majority of the story elements from In the Path of the Storm were used in the series, and the only major difference in premise at the very least is of course in the books Owl was a male, whereas in the show she's a female, but the story plays out exactly the same regardless. So with that out of the way, let's get into this story arc, but if we're going to be doing a story about travelling across the country trying to find a lover, we better get this started off with the right kind of music.
He's bound and down, loaded up and trucking. Are we gonna do what they say can't be done? We've got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound, just watch no bandit run.
So we start off in episode 2 where Owl is heading back to the town that they passed through just before they made it to White Deer Park in the first series. Just don't go camping out in bell towers this time. You know what happened to you the last time you tried that. She does go back inside the church again and comes across some literal bats in the belfry, one of which is hard to tell apart from Owl because Sally Grace does the exact same voice for both of them.
Good afternoon. Is that addressed to me personally as Chief Bat, or is it a general remark directed at all of us bats? Either way, I don't care a hoot.
But despite the bats trying to help her out, they're all about as useful as any of the other minor characters in this series.
Perhaps if I told you a story, we could all drift quietly off to sleep.
Go on then.
Well, this story, you see, is all about when I and Fox and the other Farthing Wood animals made our famous journey from Farthing Wood to White Deer Park.
Boring.
Boring.
It was on that journey, I should say, that Fox met his mate, Vixen, and...
Boring. No bats in it. Boring.
Ah, so they're going by the Kirk Cameron rules of judging a story. If it's not got Jesus in it, it sucks. Regardless, it is nice to see Owl's snarky nature when talking to the bats, which is greatly welcomed after the Weasels.
I find it very hard to talk to anyone when they're upside down.
Of course I'm upside down. I'm a bat.
That's your problem, not mine.
Never ask Owl to help out at a handicap gathering. The head bat comes back with a mate for Owl, though she clearly doesn't quite get Owl's tastes.
There you are, then. And what do you call this?
Hello, dear.
Ugh! I know it's not an owl as such, but it's a bird of some sort, isn't it?
And also never ask this bat to work at a dating agency. Though get used to seeing that Rook because he's going to be hanging around for a majority of the series. And yet surprisingly they never gave him a name. So for the purposes of this review, I'm going to call him Rooker. And before anyone comments, yes, I know that he's mostly known as Moth-Eaten-Rook, but it's still not really a proper name.
It'll do you!
So after being thoroughly insulted by the bats, which is basically the routine for this story arc, Owl gets insulted, moves on to new pastures whilst Rooker sheds a single tear. I'll get into that more when he starts appearing more in this story arc. Owl then leaves the bell tower, and that coupled with the fact that Owl is looking genuinely miserable, which is only the second time so far in this series, this has the part of the series stand above all the others on the element of being one of the saddest parts of the whole show. While Owl may be snarky and pompous, she is still a likeable character who has helped out a number of occasions, and the fact that she very rarely shows weakness due to her pride, having her go through so many emotions in this story arc, is not only a great development for her character, but a great way of exploring previously unexplored areas of the show. There are still things to make fun of though, don't worry about that. I mean, that's my job, I have to make fun of something. For example, the next morning Owl manages to come across an actual owl, and we actually see her sorting out her... hair? Eyebrow feathers? Why is she doing that exactly? I thought it was the plumage that female birds fluffed up to look attractive. Which I guess makes birds the equivalent of rappers in the animal kingdom since they're all about the booty. Despite trying to powder her beak to the best of her ability, it seems that the older owl wasn't quite as gentlemanly as he first led on.
I expect when you dry off, you don't look quite so weather-beaten.
No, as you say, a blustery night, I usually look much better. Ooh.
This is my, mate.
Avian adultery. It's an unusual place for this show to go, admittedly, but it's not too unforeseeable. After Al says goodbye to Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes. Okay, is that a groan because of the pun, or the fact that I'm making fun of the fact that Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes' marriage really did separate? Al goes off at the advice of the female owl to head to a copse that is supposedly full of male owls. Unfortunately, not only is she in for a nasty surprise, but she'll also be in a familiar area and she won't even realise it. Speaking of which, in episode 4... Yeah, there are no bits with Al in episode 3. I guess they thought to skip over the journey to the copse, which, in fairness, is the only time that they thought to have something off-screen that actually makes sense not to show. She makes her way to the copse, which is the same one that the animals stopped off in after staying at the farm in Series 1. Have you caught on to what they're doing yet? Yes, one of the many other highlights of this subplot is how Al is visiting the place that the animals went through in Series 1, which is a great nostalgia trip of how everything started. It's also great to see how much things have changed in the location since we were last there, which, believe me, is going to be quite a revel when we hit the motherlode quite soon. It's also a great nostalgia trip for me because it reminds me of what it was like when I first started this series. And what great memories they are. Seems what they need is a water purifier. Nope, and you'll probably die getting there. See you later. The animals did gather together and promptly ate each other out of desperation. Did I really sound that boring back in the day? Oh well, onwards and upwards. Unfortunately for Al, she doesn't remember that the copse in question is actually full of rooks, not owls. I guess the other owl really wants to stick it back to her for gawking at her fella. And the rooks don't seem to remember her either. Well, except for one, that is.
I know you.
Hi, Rooker. Yes, Rooker's back and is still interested in Al, despite only seeing her for a split second. This gives me the opportunity to actually get into what Rooker's character actually is. You see, he's a lovelorn, if arguably slightly misguided rook who has a thing for owls.
I'm looking for a... well, if you must know, a mate.
I'll be your mate.
How dare you!
I do love you. Ever since I set eyes on you in the bell tower.
Don't be so ridiculous! You're a rook!
There are so many jokes I could be making about this, but I won't, because the last thing I want to do is to piss off any community of people who live alternate lifestyles, particularly since I have nothing against those kind of people to begin with. Although in all seriousness, this is actually an interesting idea for a character, someone who's looking for something to make them happy, even if it doesn't make sense. It's rather endearing and something that I, sadly, can relate to, but far more than I probably should. It's been a bizarre and cruel life. Regardless, the rooks insult Al, of course, and tell her that she doesn't have a warm heart, which she protests that she definitely does.
You haven't a warm heart, treating that poor old bird like that.
Tell her she hasn't a warm heart.
I told her. Well, I do have a warm heart. Really, I do.
If she does, then she does a good job of hiding it in that deep freeze locker in her chest. Also, I'm very surprised that they don't remember Al, considering that she saved a young rabbit's life the last time she was there, just for him to die a few episodes later. I would complain about that again, but quite frankly, anything that dark is sorely welcomed right now. I mean, there's nothing wrong with being light-hearted, but this is Farthing Wood. You're meant to have some dark moments every once in a while. In any case, she promptly flies off, and then at the end of the next episode... This is another problem with the Weasel subplot and how it got so much attention. As a result, Al's subplot doesn't really get that much focus put onto it. And credit where it's due, the writers did a good job with the pacing given the limited amount of time they had, but how is it that an annoying bunch of furry gobshites wandering around the wilderness doing virtually nothing gets as much attention as the main storyline, yet this one, which is a much more important storyline overall, gets virtually no attention? It's like if in Lord of the Rings we found out what Orc number 56 was getting up to whilst the Fellowship went off to Mordor. What sense does that make? Anyway, Rooker wouldn't leave Al alone, but his weak bones make him crash into a tree. But where is that tree located, you may not be asking? Well...
No, it can't be. Yes, all my senses tell me I'm right. This is Farthing Wood. This is Farthing Wood, my old home. I used to live here.
No.
Yes, honestly.
Yep, Al's made it back to Farthing Wood now, or what's left of it. We now found out what those giant cement mixers and diggers actually did to it in the end. In fact, in the books, this place has actually got a new name. Farthinghurst. This is where Al spends most of her part of the subplot, which now makes the title a bit more apt than it used to be, since now one of the animals is in Farthing Wood, or where it used to be at the very least. Oh, and Rooker is still obsessed with Al even after this revelation.
I left my home woods in search of a mate with a single stipulation that he be an owl. Do you understand? Owl, owl, owl.
Rook. I'm a bird, ain't I?
By that logic, I could get married to an orangutan since I'm 99.9% genetically identical to one. Though thinking of that, if Rooker and Al did get together, I wonder what the kids would look like. In the next episode, well, this happens.
Get back inside the tree.
But
Get back inside.
I just wanted to.
Inside.
I thought you didn't love him, and yet you're acting like his wife. Rooker does comfort Al as she's feeling a bit depressed about how she's looking at what Farthing Wood used to be.
This place here, I'm almost sure it's Farthing Wood, my original home. But the humans have covered it in their hutches. This is the last tree left, and it's like me, old and tatty.
Oh.
Again, this is a very well done scene since it plays to the emotions that we feel towards this character, the nostalgia of the first series, and it actually develops the story. Why couldn't the whole series be like this? Rooker comforts Al, and for a brief moment there seems to be a spark of something between them. But then Al switches gears and flies off, determined to prove that it's not Farthing Wood.
You're a wonderful specimen of an owl.
Thank you. No, this can't be Farthing Wood. It can't be. It can't be!
Is it possible for rooks to get blue balls? In the process, Al goes to take a rest in an attic, and hey, I've got that exact same drying rack. She's in my attic. Well, not for long, she's not. I told you about going up there, Al. I didn't warn you. Now you're gonna get it. Alright, Al, come on out. I know you. Okay, she can stay in there. For now. A mouse in the attic warns Al that the family in the house have a cat. At least I assume it's a mouse, though they do look like the rats in White Deer Park. Maybe that's where they're escaping to, though they've got a hell of a journey in their way if that's where they're going. Maybe that will spin off into another subplot. Farthing Wood 2, The Next Generation. Doesn't quite sound as good as Fugitive 3 Weasel Run, does it? Actually, it seems like I was more on point than I thought I was.
I've heard about a place. An animal sanctuary. Where the rats are taking over. It's going to be a regular rat paradise, apparently.
Still keeping up the concept of that bizarre animal Twitter that exists in this world, apparently. Though at this point I've gotten used to it. Though speaking of which, I do wonder where that page exists. I should try and find it next time I'm on Twitter. My handle is HeadphonesUK, plug. Of course, since Al was asleep, she didn't hear any of that, but quickly wakes up when the smaller rat knocks the support bar off the windowsill, trapping Al inside. Oh great, now she'll never get out of there. The last thing I need is another peck in the ghoulies trying to get her out. Even more unluckily for Al, the cat rears its ugly head. Or rather it would, but it seems that this, unlike the other cats in the series, is a friendly cat and wants to chat with Al, but keeps scaring off other animals because, well, she's a cat.
If you see me, you won't want to chat with me.
Yes, of course I will.
No, you won't.
To be fair, I don't like being around cats. Though since I have an uncontrollable urge to reach for a hammer every time I'm around one, they probably don't like being around me either. The cat, who by the way in the books is apparently known as Sooty, No, not that one. Sooty and Al try to get Izzy Wizzy busy in trying to get the window open, and Sooty reveals the name of Farthinghurst to Al, confirming that this is in fact Farthingwood's final resting place.
It was all trees when I lived here. Farthing Wood.
No, you must have the wrong place. This house is called Farthinghurst, if that's any help. I know. Perhaps there was a wood here before they built the houses.
I'm glad I asked.
How sad. And so after some more cartoon logic with Sooty, Squeak and Sue here, the boy of the house finds Al in the attic, and the mother, who looks like a white version of Mammy Two Shoes from Tom and Jerry, but distinctly less racist, sees her too, and much like an episode of Tom and Jerry, this results in a massive slapstick routine around the house, but with distinctly lackluster animation compared to that cartoon. Though it probably doesn't help that Al hides behind an extremely ironic statue in the house. Gee, I wonder what's going to happen to that. Comedy bronze right there, folks. Al manages to get out of the way from the typical arsehole humans that are everywhere. Seriously, does no human act nicely in this world? Even the warden is a bit of a dick. And Al comes across Rooker, and his mate, of all things.
It's you. You're safe.
I managed to escape by myself. But thank you for helping. You were very brave.
I love this Al. I can't help myself.
I'll look after him now. He'll be all right, I'm sure. After a long rest.
Yes, I do hope so.
He's my mate, you see.
I didn't know he had one.
He's always off after owls. He's always been the same.
Again, I would say something about this, but I do have some very close friends who are in very well-working open relationships, so I do know a bit about what it's like. Plus, none of them are into apes as far as I'm aware. Rooker says he hopes that Al will find her right mate someday, and then Rooker's mate takes him away to the cops to heal up. In the next episode, we finally get to meet a proper male owl who isn't a cheating bastard, and his name is Hollow. His name was Holly in the books because, well, she was a girl in those, but regardless, Al seems to be quite smitten by him, and I can understand why.
Oh, what a fright you gave me. Such a commotion.
I do apologize. I didn't realize you were an owl.
Anyone who sounds like Mycroft Holmes is a hunk in my book. But of course, he acts like he's not interested in Al, and she gets all upset and blah, blah, blah. I apologise if I'm being too critical or cynical here, but this is a big problem with romantic comedies in general, which this is basically what this is at this point, that the male and female protagonists act as if they're not going to get together, and that it apparently adds suspense. No, it doesn't. We know exactly what's going to happen, particularly when you put them on the fucking poster as if they're going to get together. So the more time you spend faffing around with it, the more time I have to spend watching Julia Roberts, Al, dragging her feet until the inevitable happens. Although unlike most rom-coms, the protagonists here are actually pretty likeable. Al is of course very likeable because we've gotten to know over 3 series, and Hollow has this kind of distinguished stiff upper beak persona that is actually quite endearing, even if he can be a bit of a dick sometimes.
Of course I'm an owl.
Yes, I can see that. Bit tatty, though. What? Your mate is laid back, what?
I don't have a mate.
No mate? Oh, dead, is he? Fly into a power cable, did he? What? I don't have a mate either. Never had one. Don't need one, you know, better by myself.
Never had a mate, and yet you're still bragging about your looks and your skills to get women. Is this an animal reincarnation of Jay from The Inbetweeners? Or Sid the Sexist? In the next episode, they're still in a bit of a frosty situation about actually becoming mates. That's really tough luck, Al. I've been there myself, and it's not nice. But of course, like most rom-coms, Hollow pretends that there's another owl in his life and goes off to be with her.
She? Who's she?
She? Oh, just a young owl I know. Perfect specimen, what? Bit young for me. I'm waiting for her to mature. Then, well, you know, what? She'll be my mate. It's not that I don't like you. I've enjoyed hooting with you. You're an ace hunter, an elegant swooper. Your owlish silhouette against the waning moon is an admirable sight. It's just that you're old and, somewhat tatty, what?
Man, this really is Jay from The Inbetweeners, except he's substituting his shallow reasoning for being old instead of being fat. So of course Al gets upset by this, and we see her cry for the second time in the show, and she tries to follow Hollow, but she doesn't want to be seen by him, and so she hides in what she doesn't realise is a cement mixer, and gets encased in concrete. And of course, since we're running on cartoon logic here, the concrete sets instantly, just like in Gremlins 2, and yet it doesn't kill her straight away. But talking of instantaneous things,
This is all my fault. There is no pretty young owl. There is only an old, tatty one, covered in hard stuff.
I wish all rom-coms did this plot point this quickly, though why would he lie about that in the first place? I get that he's got a lot of pride, but what's the point in even making that up?
I love you. What? Say it again. I'd better fetch some worms, what? Very good for you, worms. I have never been so happy. Never.
But you're still stuck in that crete right now. In fact, how are you even still breathing? Anyway, in the next episode she's still inside the concrete, but Hollow isn't really much help at this point.
You're so kind and funny. Yes, yes, and handsome.
I hardly think this is the time to be egomaniacal right now, Hollow. Then in the next episode... No, seriously, that's all we see of Owl in this episode. Do you see what I was talking about with the Weasel stealing time away from this subplot? I mean, in this episode we spend half the time watching the Weasel twins ride around on a pig, and yet for Owl's subplot it's re-established that Owl is still inside the concrete, Hercule worries about it, cut to a next scene. I mean, I get that there were probably more than 3 writing teams working on this at once, but they could have at least communicated between each other more effectively. Anyway, as I was saying, in the next episode the other animals come along to try and figure out how to get Owl out, and even though Woodpecker comes up with the idea of feeding worms through the convenient mouth hole she's made for herself, by stealing it from an Irish robin no less,
Let him get his own worms.
they still can't get her out, not even the Woodpecker. Shame on you, random Woodpecker, you bring disgust to the eyes of this man.
Guess who?
This whole thing gets a lot more dire than you'd think though, since she's been stuck in there for so long she starts dying. And I have to say, trapped in the same place day after day, week after week, not being able to do anything and the people you love can only watch on and see you suffer, it's gotta be a horrible fate. I can't imagine what it must be like. Oh wait, no, I do know what that's like. That was my last year at university. Though the robin that I mentioned earlier hardly makes things better.
She'll never eat it. She's done for, she is. You wee ruffian. I'm only stating the obvious. She's more than half dead in there. Bones and feathers. Admit it.
Thank you, Professor Morbid. We didn't need all the expounding obviousnesses, thank you very much. Though Owl manages to eat the worm after seeing another female owl come along, and Hollow delivers a beautiful sonnet about Owl.
Excuse me. You are the most attractive owl I have ever seen. Your silhouette before the waning moon must be a sight to see. But this tatty old owl, ruined inside cement, it is she that I love.
Please yourself.
That one works on the ladies every time. And yes, if you're going to use it, you have to use the word owl, otherwise it doesn't work. Though Robin, for a change, does actually come up with a good idea.
I know. Why don't we just shove her off the branch? The cement will break when she hits the ground and hey presto, out she'll come. You need a robin for ideas like that.
I would say that's extraordinarily dangerous, but given what happens whenever Whistler drops someone from about 50 feet in the air, it probably isn't a bad idea. Nice go, Rockin' Robin. Or it would be if it actually did anything, but unfortunately it didn't, and just to add insult to injury, a bunch of kids then use Owl as one of their impromptu goalposts for their football game in the next episode. Though it's better than using a bunch of coats instead that are piled up on the floor. Though, just a bit of an odd tangent by the way, what is with that? Is it goal is actually as high as the pile of coats? Or how do you actually judge how high the goal is supposed to be? Because you can go over the goal, and sometimes it will bounce off the top of it. So why is a pile of coats the first thing people go to? Other than the fact that you probably will be taking them off because you're running around and everything, but It's not going to be worth it when your mum finds out what you've been doing with those coats the whole time. But even the football crashing into her doesn't get her out, though it does make a chip in the cement's armour. Sorry, Mythbusters narrator, for stealing your line there, but in that regard, don't tell the Mythbusters about this. The last thing we want to do is for them to use a bunch of explosives to get Owl out, otherwise she'll end up looking like this.
Well, there's your problem.
Of course, this being episode 10 means only one thing: hurricane. And because of that, the last tree of Farthing Wood collapses on Owl. And of course, because we're running on cartoon logic, instead of crushing her flat, the final true piece of Farthing Wood sets Owl free from her prison. I always feel wrong having to use another bigger reviewer's footage in order to have a joke that they did. But then again, it's probably better than actually saying it myself. They'd probably sue me for it. Then again, this wouldn't exactly stop them from doing that either.
Oh, look! You're free! Catcher, but free!
Even in this miraculous moment, he's still really super egomaniacal and critical. I think we found Simon Cowell reincarnated as an owl, which would make sense. He has got the word owl in his name. I guess he's not king of the beavers after all. After the storm has passed, since Owl's bones are fortunately not all broken from either the weight of the cement or the impact of the tree landing on her, she and Hollow say their last goodbye to what's left of Farthing Wood. Not that there really is anything left of the old wood now that that tree has been ripped out of the ground by the wind, and they head back to White Deer Park. Or at least they would, but Hollow feels that Owl isn't quite up to it yet.
You're far too weak. After all that time you spent locked in your cement overcoat. What?
Her concrete what? But Owl eventually puts her claws down and they head off, and on the way there, whilst passing what's left of the old copse there, as promised, we see an old familiar face one last time.
Owl. Owl. My own dearest sweet Owl.
Hi Rooker! I'd ask you what you've been doing in the meantime, but I get the feeling that the answer is going to involve a lot of fan art pictures of Owl and some hand lotion.
What? What? Do you know this Moth-Eaten-Rook?
Well, in a way.
I've never stopped loving you. Every moment since we parted, I've thought of you. I love you.
You love her? What? I love her.
Oh, mate, the missus and the ex. Welcome to every man's worst nightmare.
My wife was killed in the hurricane. All the other rooks were too. Unfortunately, I have a new responsibility which prevents me from flying away with you to bird paradise. This poor little orphan rook. I must be mother and father to it. There's no one else. Do you understand?
Yes, of course.
And so Rooker, who is now destined to help bring up this young chick in the absence of his mother and father, which is quite a bittersweet ending for a character who was only looking for love in... Where would you call it, Johnny?
I was looking for love in all the wrong places, looking for love in too many faces.
Well, we started off with a country western song, and now we're ending with one as well. That'll make my southern US fans very happy. If I have any.
Whenever I hear a rook call, I shall think of you.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to say.
So with Rooker and Owl parting on equal terms, the 1,000 fanboys and girls screaming that she should have gotten together with him. And no, that's not a joke, by the way. Why do you think people make fan art like this in the first place? Owl and Hollow head on their way back to White Deer Park, but they may not be expecting to see what is there when they arrive. And that was Owl's subplot, and while I don't know if I could say if it's the best of the subplots of Series 3, it's definitely the most tolerable, and probably has some of the best bits of character development in it, particularly for Owl, who gets more development here than she did in Series 1 and 2, and even some of the new characters are quite enjoyable, even if Hollow's ego does make him a tad annoying at times, and the nostalgia trip back to the first series, even though those bits are brief, is very enjoyable. But now we're coming to the end of the story, and it's time to take a look at where all the subplots converge in the final episode. What will the animals think of Owl and Weasel's return? Who will win the war? Will Laird continue to be awesome? And will I ever get a girlfriend by talking about this show for a living? The answers to all these questions and more will be in the final episode. Except for the girlfriend one, probably. But now I've had enough of this, I'm going on the other side to have a bath. Bye! around the wilderness. If it's not stammering, then it's pronouncing the words wrong. It's like if in Lord of the Rings we found out what us got so close. Shy, it's wandering around. I keep saying wandering. It's wandering. I knew this line would give me trouble. Is there any way I can make my fringe make myself look less like Adolf Hitler? Oh, that looks rank. I'm gonna be finding feathers around here for weeks. Right, let's do a test. La la la. I apologise if anyone actually watches this in the future. I do have a terrible singing voice.